blood pooling slightly on the edge of a split lip, the cold, unforgiving bite of plastic zip ties cutting off circulation to the wrists, biting deep into the skin with every microscopic movement. A claustrophobic sea of smartphones capturing the humiliation, holding the violence in digital amber for millions to consume. Yet, the dark eyes reflecting in those countless camera lenses hold no panic. No frantic plea for mercy, only the terrifying glacial calm of a man watching a trap snap shut on his captors. "Ground the plane now!" The voice does not shake, it does not plead, it commands with the absolute gravity of a falling mountain. The words echo in the narrow, pressurized cabin, slicing through the adrenaline and the outrage. But to understand the true weight of that command, to comprehend the seismic shift about to fracture the foundations of the commercial aviation industry, the clock must rewind. The anatomy of an injustice is never born in the moment of violence. It is meticulously constructed brick by brick through 1,000 quiet indignities. Manhattan dawn paints the skyline in bruised shades of violet and slate. David Brooks stands motionless by the floor-to-ceiling glass of his Tribeca penthouse, a silhouette carved against the waking city. At 45, he possesses the lean, coiled architecture of a man who has spent 2 decades navigating the treacherous currents of corporate warfare and emerged as the apex predator. Horizon Aviation, the empire he built from a single leased prop plane, now controls a fleet that shadows the globe. Today, the stakes are not measured in millions, but in the structural integrity of a legacy. Horizon is in the final stages of negotiating a massive multi-billion-dollar lease agreement to provide 50 state-of-the-art wide-body jets to Apex Airlines. It is a deal that will alter the market share of the entire hemisphere, but spreadsheets and quarterly projections only tell the sanitized version of a company's soul. Whispers have reached David's mahogany desk, persistent, troubling reports of a toxic corporate culture bleeding down through the ranks of Apex Airlines. Allegations of systemic bias, of customer service weaponized against minorities, of an operational hierarchy that rewards cruelty disguised as policy. A spreadsheet cannot confirm a cultural rot. To understand the true nature of the beast, one must walk into its cage without armor. The wardrobe selection is an exercise in strategic camouflage. Power doesn't need to shout when it holds the deed to the building. The garment chosen is a navy cashmere sweater by Loro Piana. It bears no logos, no ostentatious hardware, nothing to announce its exorbitant cost to the untrained eye. It is woven from uncompromising wealth, designed to drape flawlessly over his broad shoulders, yet to the casual observer, it is merely a dark, simple pullover. Selvedge denim, dark and stiff, replaces the bespoke suits that usually define his public silhouette. Unmarked minimalist leather sneakers complete the uniform. He leaves the platinum Patek Philippe resting on the polished oak of his dresser, opting instead for a blank, unadorned wrist. He is actively stripping away the universal signifiers of extreme wealth. He is becoming invisible. He is becoming a target. The descent into the city streets is a transition from the sanctuary of untouchable privilege to the gritty, unpredictable arena of the public sphere. The armored town car glides through the morning traffic, the tinted windows rendering the outside world a silent movie. Inside the cabin, David reviews the Apex Airlines dossier one final time on his encrypted tablet. The numbers are pristine, the profit margins aggressive, the leadership structure dominated by men who view passengers as raw cargo. William Davis, the regional director, has optimized the New York hub for ruthless efficiency, boasting record turnaround times. But the passenger complaint logs buried deep in the appendices tell a darker narrative, a pattern of discriminatory profiling, quietly settled out of court buried under non-disclosure agreements. David closes the tablet. The digital ghosts are about to become flesh and blood. John F. Kennedy International Airport Terminal 4. The chaotic, fluorescent-lit cathedral of modern travel. The town car slows to a halt at the curbside drop-off. The driver, a man who has protected David for 10 years, turns with a look of quiet concern, aware of the anomaly of his employer walking unescorted into the commercial terminal. "I will handle the luggage from here. Keep the encrypted line open." The driver nods, the heavy door thudding shut, severing the final tether to the world of billionaires. David steps onto the concrete. The roar of jet engines mixes with the shrill blasts of traffic whistles. He grasps the handle of his modest, scuffed leather duffel bag. He breathes in the scent of jet fuel and nervous sweat. The experiment begins. The first-class priority lane at the Apex Airlines check-in counter is cordoned off by thick crimson velvet ropes, a visual moat separating the elite from the masses. David approaches the entrance, the rolling wheels of his duffel moving smoothly over the terrazzo floor. The queue is empty, save for a single agent stationed behind the elevated podium. She is a woman in her late 30s, her uniform crisp, her name tag bearing the logo of a company she fiercely defends. As David steps onto the plush red carpet of the priority lane, her eyes snap up. The assessment is instantaneous and deeply flawed. Her gaze sweeps over the unmarked navy sweater, the denim, the lack of a designer monogram on the luggage, and finally settles on the color of his skin. The invisible calculus of prejudice runs its course in a fraction of a second. She steps out from behind the podium, physically inserting herself into the center of the lane, a human barricade against perceived trespassing. "The main cabin check-in is located in Zone C, down the hall to your left." The voice is rigidly polite, the kind of corporate courtesy designed to mask a profound disrespect. David halts, his posture relaxed, his expression an unreadable mask of absolute stillness. He reaches into the interior pocket of his jacket, extracting a thick physical boarding pass. He prefers paper. It provides an undeniable tactile reality to a transaction. "I am checking in for Flight 412, Seat 2A. He extends the boarding pass. The agent does not take it immediately. She looks at the piece of paper as if it might be contaminated, her brow furrowing in a display of theatrical suspicion. She slowly pinches the edge of the card, pulling it toward her, her eyes scanning the bold black ink. "Seat 2A, first class, priority. I need to see government-issued identification." The demand is standard protocol, but the delivery is laced with an accusatory edge, a subtle implication that the document in her hand must somehow be a forgery. David complies without a flicker of irritation. He hands over his passport. The agent returns to her terminal, her fingers striking the keys with unnecessary force. The typing goes on for entirely too long. She is digging, searching for a discrepancy, a canceled credit card, a glitch in the matrix that will validate her initial assumption. Was this ticket purchased through a third-party discount vendor? It was purchased directly through the Apex corporate portal. She sighs, a short, sharp exhalation of disbelief. Her eyes dart from the screen to his face, comparing the stoic features of the man standing before her with the profile of the high-net-worth individual the system insists he is. Prejudice is a debt collected in small, humiliating installments. She is determined to extract her payment. The system is flagging the billing zip code. I need the physical credit card used for the transaction to verify ownership of the ticket. It is a blatant escalation, a hurdle rarely erected for passengers matching the traditional demographic of the first-class cabin. David's pulse remains a steady, rhythmic drumbeat. He reaches into his pocket and withdraws a sleek, heavy card. It is entirely black, forged from anodized titanium, devoid of numbers or limits, bearing only his name, the American Express Centurion. He slides the heavy metal across the counter. The metallic clink against the laminate surface is surprisingly loud. The agent stares at the card. The cognitive dissonance is violently jarring. The card represents a level of wealth that eclipses the standard affluent traveler, a financial echelon that commands absolute deference. Her hands hesitate before touching it. She processes the card, the terminal glowing with immediate, unquestionable approval. Your boarding pass is verified. Proceed to security. She slides the passport and the metal card back across the counter, avoiding eye contact. There is no apology. There is no acknowledgement of the friction she just manufactured. She simply retreats behind her terminal, defeated by the plastic and metal reality of his status, but her underlying bias remains utterly intact. David secures his documents. He does not demand an apology. A quiet man in a loud room is either a fool or the architect, and David is currently drafting the blueprints for a demolition. The journey continues toward the TSA security checkpoint. The priority lane here is heavily populated, a stagnant river of anxious business travelers checking their luxury watches. David merges into the flow. The atmosphere is thick with the ambient stress of federal scrutiny. Ahead of him, a man in a rumpled gray suit breezes through the metal detector with a brief nod to the officers. David places his leather duffel onto the conveyor belt. He steps toward the millimeter wave scanner. The officer stationed at the machine, a thick-set man with a bored expression, suddenly straightens. As David steps onto the yellow footprints and raises his arms, the machine completes its sweep. The screen flashes green. Clear. Step aside, please. Random selection. The officer's voice is flat, devoid of emotion, a practiced authoritarian drone. David lowers his arms and steps out of the machine. He knows the statistics. He knows the algorithms of randomness. He watches as his duffel bag emerges from the X-ray tunnel. Another officer, this one younger with a tight, aggressive jawline, pulls the bag off the main belt and onto the stainless steel inspection table. Is this your bag, sir? It is. I need to perform a manual inspection. Do you have anything sharp, hazardous, or fragile inside? No. The officer unzips the duffel. The search is not perfunctory. It is a slow, deliberate dismantling of his privacy. The officer's gloved hands dig aggressively through the neatly folded garments. He pulls out the encrypted laptop, holding it up to the harsh fluorescent light, turning it over as if inspecting a smuggled artifact. He swabs the keyboard, the edges, the ports, placing the white cloth into the explosive trace detection machine. Turn on the device. David steps forward, placing his thumb on the biometric scanner. The screen illuminates instantly, displaying a blank, secure login portal. The officer stares at the screen, frustrated by the lack of personal data, the impenetrable wall of corporate security. He shoves the laptop back into the bag, not bothering to repack the garments he disturbed. I need to conduct a physical pat-down. Stand on the mat, spread your feet. The invasion of personal space begins. The officer's hands are heavy, moving down David's arms, across his chest, down his sides. The touch is a fraction too firm, an assertion of physical dominance cloaked in the mandate of national security. The hands slide down the inseam of his denim, lingering near the waistband, pressing into the fabric. The unspoken assumptions hang toxic and heavy in the sterile, fluorescent air. Around them, other priority passengers, mostly white, mostly adorned in the standard uniform of corporate middle management, glance over. Their eyes hold a mixture of relief that they were not chosen and a quiet, insidious judgment, projecting their own internalized biases onto the black man being searched. They see a potential threat. They do not see the man who could buy the airline they are about to fly on and sell it for scrap. David breathes through it. His face remains impassive, a mask carved from obsidian. He catalogues the physical sensations, the precise nature of the friction. He is not merely enduring, he is auditing. This is the ecosystem Horizon Aviation is preparing to marry. It is an orchard of poisoned fruit, and he is walking through the center of the blight. You're clear. Collect your belongings. The officer steps back, already looking past David to the next passenger. David calmly repacks his duffel bag, folding the disturbed garments with meticulous precision. He slides the laptop into its protective sleeve. He shoulders the bag and walks away from the checkpoint, his stride unbroken, his dignity entirely unbreached. True authority wears patience like armor. The concourse is a sprawling artery of commerce and transit. High-end boutiques sit adjacent to crowded departure gates. David navigates the flow of humanity, his eyes constantly analyzing the environment as he approaches the vicinity of Gate 42. His attention is caught by a commotion near a premium coffee kiosk. A man in his early 50s wearing a sharp, tailored slate gray suit and a platinum Rolex is aggressively leaning over the counter, his face flushed with unearned indignation. "I ordered a flat white. Perfectly 130 degrees. This is scalding. Are you completely incompetent? I am a Diamond Medallion member. I don't have time to wait for you to figure out how to steam milk." The barista, a young woman looking utterly overwhelmed, stammers an apology, her hands shaking as she reaches for a new cup. The man in the suit sneers, checking his watch with a theatrical flick of his wrist. This is Charles Montgomery, the VIP, the man who expects the world to bend to the gravity of his frequent flyer status. David watches the interaction from 20 feet away. He observes the casual cruelty, the weaponization of economic status to demean service staff. It is a specific type of rot, a sickness of entitlement. Montgomery snatches the replacement coffee without a word of thanks and pivots, marching down the concourse toward Gate 42. David follows at a distance. The ecosystem is fully revealing itself. The passengers, the staff, the security, every interaction is steeped in a rigid, unforgiving hierarchy. Gate 42 is a holding pen of exhausted travelers. The digital display above the door announces Apex Airlines Flight 412 to Los Angeles. The seating area is completely full. Passengers sit on the carpet leaning against structural pillars, devices tethered to limited power outlets. Behind the gate desk, 2 agents are furiously typing, occasionally announcing unintelligible updates over the crackling public address system. David finds an empty sliver of wall near the large plate glass window overlooking the tarmac. Below, the massive Boeing 777 sits attached to the jet bridge like a metal parasite. The Horizon Aviation logo is subtly stamped near the tail, a microscopic detail invisible to the untrained eye, but glaringly obvious to the man who owns the patent on the engine cowlings. It is his machinery, his asset, currently in the hands of a company that treats its passengers like cattle. The public address system hums to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, Apex Airlines Flight 412 is now ready for boarding. We invite our first-class passengers, Diamond Medallion members, and those needing extra time to approach the priority lane at this time." A collective shuffle echoes through the gate area. Charles Montgomery, holding his perfectly heated flat white, pushes past a family with a stroller, flashing his digital boarding pass as if it were a diplomatic shield. He strides down the priority lane, disappearing into the jet bridge. David pushes off the wall. He adjusts the strap of his duffel bag and approaches the priority lane. The gate agent, a young man looking severely overworked, takes the physical boarding pass. He scans it. The machine beeps a pleasant, confirming tone. "Have a good flight, Mr. Brooks." The first seamless interaction of the morning. David nods and walks past the desk, entering the sloping ribbed tunnel of the jet bridge. The air grows cooler, carrying the distinct metallic scent of aviation. The muffled roar of the auxiliary power unit vibrates through the floorboards. He reaches the end of the tunnel. The heavy aircraft door is pinned open. The first-class cabin is visible, bathed in warm, artificial light, the expansive leather seats inviting and luxurious. Standing perfectly centered in the doorway, blocking the entrance with the rigid posture of a palace guard, is Nancy. She is a flight attendant with the seasoned, hard-edged look of someone who has flown the transcontinental route for 25 years. Her blonde hair is pulled back into an immaculate, shellacked twist. Her uniform is sharply pressed, the wings pinned precisely over her left breast. She is the gatekeeper, the final authority before the cabin door seals. As David steps onto the threshold of the aircraft, Nancy's eyes lock onto him. The visual scan is rapid, surgical, and entirely hostile. She takes in the Loro Piana sweater, the denim, the lack of a suit jacket, the color of his skin. Her jaw tightens. She does not step aside. She physically occupies the center of the aisle, planting her sensible black heels firmly into the carpet. "Excuse me, the main cabin boarding has not commenced. You need to wait in the gate area." Her voice is loud, designed to carry, projecting her authority to the passengers already seated in the cabin. She has instantly, unequivocally categorized him. David stops. He is inches away from her. The height difference forces her to tilt her chin upward, but she refuses to yield an inch of space. The most dangerous predators are the ones who smile while locking the cage. Nancy is not smiling. "I am boarding first class." He keeps his voice modulated, low, entirely devoid of the defensive aggression she expects. He extends the physical boarding pass, the bold lettering clearly displaying Seat 2A. Nancy looks at the boarding pass. She does not take it. She stares at the black ink, her mind desperately trying to reconcile the data with her deeply entrenched worldview. The gears of her prejudice grind against the undeniable reality of the document. She crosses her arms over her chest, forming a physical barrier over her uniform wings. "I need to see the name on that ticket. We have a lot of issues with people trying to sneak into the premium cabin." She finally snatches the heavy paper from his fingers. She holds it up to the cabin light, squinting dramatically. She looks from the name David Brooks to the man standing before her. "This doesn't look right. It is a standard Apex Airlines boarding pass printed at your check-in counter 20 minutes ago. I know what a boarding pass looks like, sir, but I also know who belongs in my cabin." The possessive pronoun hangs in the air. My cabin. She views the space not as a service environment, but as a fiefdom, and she is the absolute monarch. Behind her, Charles Montgomery, already settling into Seat 1A, peers over the top of his financial newspaper, observing the interaction with a look of mild amusement and inherent solidarity with the flight attendant. "Are you suggesting the boarding pass is fraudulent?" David's voice remains a calm, even baseline. He is giving her the rope, watching her eagerly tie the knot. "I'm saying that sometimes the gate agents make mistakes. They upgrade people who aren't supposed to be up here. People who don't understand the etiquette of the premium cabin." She takes a step forward, invading his personal space, trying to force him backward out of the aircraft door. David does not move. He is a monolith of dark cashmere and unyielding will. "I purchased the ticket. I am assigned Seat 2A. I suggest you allow me to board." Nancy's face flushes with anger. The refusal to submit, the quiet, unwavering defiance of her authority strikes a nerve that bypasses all customer service training and taps directly into her core biases. She drops all pretense of procedural concern. "Look, I don't know whose miles you used or what glitch got you that piece of paper, but people like you usually find the main cabin more comfortable anyway. Why don't you just step back onto the bridge while I sort this out with the gate?" People like you. The words are a physical strike. They are the crystallization of every microaggression he has faced since stepping out of his penthouse. The check-in agent's suspicion, the TSA officer's heavy hands, all culminating in this woman blocking the aisle of an aircraft he legally owns. David looks down at Nancy, his eyes, usually cool and analytical, darken with the terrifying weight of absolute power held perfectly in check. He does not raise his voice, he does not threaten her. He simply delivers the final warning, a quiet premonition of the avalanche she has just triggered. "I am not stepping back, and you are going to regret those words." The ambient temperature inside the Boeing 777 cabin hovers at a precisely climate-controlled 68 degrees, yet the atmosphere immediately surrounding Seat 2A feels entirely suffocating. David lowers himself into the wide, slate-gray leather of the window seat. The upholstery sighs under his weight. He does not recline. He does not immediately reach for the complimentary noise-canceling headphones or the pre-departure beverage menu tucked into the seatback pocket. His posture remains meticulously vertical, the physical embodiment of a fortress preparing for a siege. The boarding process flows around him, a steady, shuffling river of economy passengers moving down the narrow central artery of the aircraft. They drag overstuffed carry-on bags, their faces etched with the universal fatigue of modern transit. As they bottleneck in the first-class aisle, their eyes inevitably drift sideways. The social hierarchy of the cabin is visual and immediate. They look at the expansive legroom, the pristine hot towels resting on ceramic saucers, and then they look at the black man in the unmarked navy sweater sitting quietly in the second row. The micro-expressions flicker across their faces in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, and in some, a fleeting, deeply conditioned resentment. The architecture of American privilege has trained them to expect a different demographic occupying this specific real estate. David observes their glances in the reflection of the double-paned window. He catalogs the data. The toxicity is not merely a corporate policy handed down from the Apex Airlines boardroom. It is a cultural rot permeating the entire ecosystem, a shared delusion that some bodies naturally belong in spaces of comfort, while others are inherently suspect. The rhythmic thud of a heavy leather briefcase striking the bulkhead breaks the low murmur of the cabin. Charles Montgomery breaches the aircraft door. He is sweating, a thin sheen of moisture catching the harsh fluorescent light above the galley. His breathing is shallow and rapid, the physiological byproduct of sprinting through Terminal 4 after a 3-martini lunch at the flagship lounge. He reeks of expensive gin and unspoken authority. His slate-gray suit is slightly rumpled, the silk tie loosened just enough to signal his irritation to the world. He does not look at the flight attendants. He expects them to part for him like the Red Sea. He clutches a digital boarding pass on his phone, the screen glowing with the platinum insignia of top-tier loyalty status. The heavy, aggressive footfalls stop abruptly beside row 2. Charles stares down at seat 2A. His brow furrows deeply, the skin folding over eyes that are bloodshot and incredulous. He looks at the empty seat 2B, then back to the window where David sits in absolute, unbothered silence. The geometry of the situation is unacceptable to the VIP. He checks his phone again, tapping the screen with a violent jab of his index finger. The heavy briefcase drops to the carpeted floor with a dull, entitled thud. "This is my seat." The declaration is not directed at David. It is cast into the air, a royal decree demanding immediate enforcement from the nearest servant. Nancy materializes instantly from the forward galley, her professional smile stretching taut across her jawline. She recognizes the platinum medallion tag swinging from the handle of the discarded briefcase. She recognizes the archetype. This is the customer Apex Airlines worships, the high-margin frequent flyer whose comfort dictates the operational tempo of the entire flight. "Mr. Montgomery, we were worried you might miss the departure." The apology in her tone is thick and syrupy. Charles does not acknowledge the greeting. He points a trembling, manicured finger directly at the crown of David's head. "I always sit in 2A. My profile specifically mandates a window seat on the port side. Why is there a standby passenger in my assigned location?" The assumption is immediate and absolute. In Charles's reality, a black man in casual clothing cannot possess legitimate economic claim to the premium cabin. Therefore, he must be an operational error, a standby freeloader who slipped through the cracks of gate management. Nancy's eyes dart toward David. The hostility from their previous encounter on the jet bridge reignites, fueled now by the righteous indignation of a high-value customer. She has her mandate. She steps into the aisle, aligning herself physically and ideologically with the wealthy white man hovering over the row. "Sir, there has been an administrative error with your boarding pass." David slowly turns his head. The movement is deliberate, devoid of any sudden jerks that could be misconstrued as aggression. He meets Nancy's gaze, then shifts his eyes to Charles, taking in the flushed face, the aggressive posture, the smell of gin. He is dissecting the anatomy of their shared entitlement. The cashmere draped over his shoulders absorbs the chill of the overhead air vent. There is no error. I am seated in the location I purchased. Charles lets out a sharp, incredulous laugh, a sound that scrapes against the quiet hum of the cabin. He leans forward, gripping the edge of the overhead bin, bringing his face uncomfortably close to David's personal space. Look at him. Does he look like he belongs here? I am a Diamond member. I generate more revenue for this airline in a month than he will see in a lifetime. Get him out of my seat. The ugliness of the sentiment is laid bare, stripped of any corporate euphemism. The surrounding passengers freeze. In seat 3B, a young man with wire-rimmed glasses and a subtle, high-end camera rig carefully slides his smartphone out of his pocket. His thumb hovers over the record button. The digital witness is awakening. The air in the first-class cabin thickens, heavy with the impending collision of immovable objects. Nancy places a reassuring hand on Charles's sleeve, a physical gesture of solidarity. Her voice drops an octave, adopting the firm, patronizing tone typically reserved for managing unruly children or confused elderly passengers. I need you to gather your belongings and relocate to the main cabin immediately. We will attempt to find an economy seat for you so you do not have to deplane, provided you cooperate. The first escalation, the demand for submission, the explicit instruction to retreat to the back of the aircraft, to accept a diminished status based entirely on the visual assessment of two individuals blinded by their own bias. David's pulse remains a flat, steady line. The biometric sensors of the Patek Philippe left on his dresser in Tribeca would record no spike in heart rate. The power dynamic they believe they are enforcing is a fragile illusion, a paper wall leaning against a hurricane. The dark eyes lock onto Nancy's face. I paid for this seat. The refusal is quiet, polite, and completely uncompromising. It drops into the tense silence of the cabin like a lead weight. Charles recoils slightly, entirely unaccustomed to the word no existing in his immediate proximity. His face transitions from flush pink to a dangerous, mottled crimson. This is outrageous. I am not flying to Los Angeles next to... I am not dealing with this. Call the purser, call the captain. I want this man removed from the aircraft. The tantrum escalates. Charles is vibrating with rage, the perceived insult to his status overriding any basic social decorum. Nancy's professional facade cracks further. The situation is slipping beyond her immediate control, threatening the on-time departure metric that dictates her monthly bonuses. She views David not as a customer, but as an existential threat to her authority and her livelihood. Sir, you are creating a disturbance. Federal aviation regulations require you to follow crew member instructions. If you do not move to the back of the plane right now, I will consider you a threat to the safety of this flight. The weaponization of federal law. It is the ultimate trump card in the flight attendant's arsenal, designed to crush dissent through the terrifying prospect of government intervention. She is explicitly labeling him a danger, transforming a simple seating dispute into a matter of national security. The phrasing is intentional, pulling the trigger on the heaviest artillery she possesses. The passenger in 1A, a wealthy woman swathed in designer silk, aggressively turns the page of her magazine, loudly expressing her annoyance at the delay. She does not look at David. She looks at her Rolex. The bystander complicity ripples through the premium cabin. They want the friction erased. They do not care about the injustice. They care about their schedules. In seat 3B, the smartphone screen illuminates. The red recording circle pulses like a digital heartbeat. The lens focuses tightly on the confrontation. David does not break eye contact with the flight attendant. He calculates the legal exposure Apex Airlines is currently accumulating with every syllable she utters. Section 4. Paragraph B of the Horizon Aviation Master Lease Agreement explicitly prohibits the lessee from engaging in discriminatory practices while operating the leased asset. They are currently violating the core terms of a multi-billion-dollar contract over a cup of warm gin and a bruised ego. The broad shoulders shift slightly against the leather. I am not moving. The second refusal. The tension in the fuselage snaps tight like a piano wire. Nancy's breath hitches. She has played her highest card and it has been entirely ignored. The black man in the unmarked sweater has absorbed the threat of federal consequences without a flinch. This is uncharted territory. Panic begins to bleed into her anger. Do not move. Do not say another word. She spins on her sensible heels and marches toward the forward galley. She snatches the red intercom handset from its cradle, punching the numeric code for the flight deck with violent stabbing motions. The heavy reinforced door of the cockpit remains sealed, but the electronic chime echoes ominously through the forward cabin. Charles stands in the aisle, his arms crossed over his chest, a smug, vindictive smirk playing across his lips. He looks down at David. You should have walked away when you had the chance. Now you're going to leave in handcuffs. You people never know when you're beaten. The explicit racial coding, you people. The mask slips entirely. David catalogs the phrase, filing it away in the meticulous vault of his memory. He does not respond to the provocation. Engaging in a verbal sparring match with a drunk, entitled mid-level executive is beneath him. The silence is a far more devastating weapon. It deprives Charles of the conflict he craves, leaving him standing awkwardly in the aisle, his bigotry hanging naked in the silent air. The heavy lock of the cockpit door disengages with a loud mechanical clank. The door swings open. Captain Robert Mitchell steps into the forward galley. He is a man carved from the archaic bedrock of the golden age of aviation. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, a slight pot belly pushing against the crisp white cotton of his uniform shirt, 4 heavy gold stripes adorning the epaulets on his shoulders. He has flown commercial routes for 30 years. He views the aircraft as a sovereign nation and himself as its unquestioned absolute dictator. He does not tolerate delays. He does not tolerate insubordination, and he explicitly trusts the judgment of his veteran flight crews over any passenger grievance. Nancy speaks in a rapid, hushed, frantic whisper, gesturing wildly toward row 2. Mitchell listens, his face setting into a mask of grim, paternalistic authority. He does not ask to see the passenger manifest. He does not request the digital seating chart from his electronic flight bag. He accepts Nancy's narrative entirely. A standby passenger is refusing to yield a premium seat to a Diamond member, creating a security disturbance. The details are irrelevant. The defiance of his crew is the only crime that matters. Mitchell strides out of the galley. His presence commands the immediate attention of the entire cabin. He stops at row 2, standing shoulder to shoulder with Charles Montgomery. He looks down at David. The assessment is identical to Nancy's, filtered through 3 decades of unchecked authority. The gold stripes catch the overhead light. I understand we have a problem here. David looks up at the captain. He sees a man utterly blind to his own imminent destruction. A man who has forgotten that the machinery he commands is owned by forces far larger than his ego. There is no problem, Captain. I am seated in my ticketed location. Mitchell's eyes narrow. He is not accustomed to passengers maintaining eye contact, let alone challenging his premise. He leans forward, resting one heavy hand on the top of the seat in front of David, invading the airspace. I don't care who you think you are or what piece of paper you managed to print out at the kiosk. My crew says you are a problem. That's enough for me. On my aircraft, I am the law. The declaration of absolute sovereignty. It is a phrase Mitchell has likely used 100 times to cow unruly drunks or belligerent tourists into submission. It is the verbal equivalent of a club. The smartphone in row 3B adjusts its focus, capturing the stark contrast between the red-faced, posturing captain and the icy, immovable calm of the black man in the window seat. David's voice remains a masterclass in modulation, quiet enough to force Mitchell to strain slightly to hear it, yet carrying the undeniable weight of granite. "This is not your aircraft, you merely operate it, and you are making a catastrophic mistake." The third refusal. It is not merely a denial of the order, it is a direct assault on Mitchell's entire worldview. The assertion that the captain is merely an operator, a temporary tenant of the machinery, strikes Mitchell like a physical blow. The veins in his thick neck bulge against the tight collar of his uniform. The silver hair seems to bristle. The heavy hand slaps the plastic seatback with a violent crack. "You have 30 seconds to comply and walk your ass to the back of this plane, or I am having you forcibly removed by Port Authority police. The clock starts now." Mitchell turns his wrist, dramatically staring at the face of his oversized aviator watch. The countdown begins. The silence in the cabin becomes absolute, a physical weight pressing against the eardrums. The air conditioning hums relentlessly. Charles Montgomery shifts his weight from one foot to the other, a bead of sweat tracing the curve of his jaw. Even he senses the subtle shift in gravity, the terrifying absence of fear radiating from seat 2A. A normal man facing arrest, humiliation, and federal charges would beg, bargain, or retreat. David does none of these things. He simply waits. 20 seconds. The woman in 1A stops pretending to read. She clutches her designer handbag to her chest, her knuckles white. The digital lens in 3B zooms in tighter, capturing the slow, rhythmic blink of David's dark eyes. 10 seconds. Nancy stands frozen in the galley, her hand covering her mouth. The adrenaline high of wielding power is rapidly decaying into a cold, creeping dread. The man is not breaking. 5 seconds. Mitchell drops his arm. He glares at David, his face a mask of furious disbelief. The passenger has called his bluff, forcing him to execute the nuclear option. The captain turns his head toward the open aircraft door leading to the jet bridge. The roar echoes down the tunnel. "We need immediate assistance at the forward boarding door. Unruly passenger, send the unit." The die is cast. The point of no return is crossed. The machinery of state violence is summoned to resolve a customer service dispute generated by racial bias. David closes his eyes for a fraction of a second, mourning the inevitable, ugly destruction of the human beings standing before him. They have chosen their path. Heavy, synchronized footfalls echo from the jet bridge. The sound is distinct from the shuffling steps of passengers. It is the rhythmic, purposeful march of tactical boots on hollow metal. 2 officers from the Port Authority Police Department breach the aircraft. They are large men, their duty belts heavy with the implements of coercion. Batons, radios, heavy steel handcuffs, and bundles of thick black plastic zip ties. The lead officer, a man whose name tag reads Miller, has a shaved head and a thick, aggressive jawline. His eyes scan the cabin, seeking the threat. Captain Mitchell points a rigid finger at seat 2A. "This individual is refusing crew instructions, delaying the departure, and trespassing in the premium cabin. I want him off my plane." Miller does not hesitate. He does not ask for David's side of the story. He does not request identification or verify the boarding pass. The captain's word is gospel. The black man in the seat is the designated hostile. Miller unclips the heavy radio from his shoulder strap. The static crackles. "Dispatch Unit 4. We are executing an extraction on Flight 412. Suspect is non-compliant." Miller pushes past Charles, his tactical vest brushing against the expensive suit. He stands directly over David, his massive frame blocking the overhead light, casting seat 2A in deep shadow. The second officer takes a position behind Miller, hand resting casually on the butt of his baton. "Sir, you need to come with us right now. Stand up." The command is a bark. Devoid of any de-escalation tactics, it is an order designed to provoke compliance through the immediate threat of overwhelming physical force. David opens his eyes. He looks at Miller. He recognizes the hyper-adrenalized state of the officer, the dangerous eagerness to deploy violence. Any sudden movement will be interpreted as a threat. Any raised voice will be classified as resisting arrest. The cashmere shifts as he speaks with slow, deliberate clarity. I am not resisting. I will stand up. I will walk out. David places his hands flat on the armrests. He begins to rise slowly, ensuring his movements are entirely predictable. He is offering complete, peaceful cooperation. He is attempting to de-escalate the volatile chemistry of the cabin. Miller's training, or his deeply ingrained prejudices, overrides the visual evidence of compliance. In Miller's mind, the suspect is large, black, and has already defied the captain. The slow movement is interpreted not as cooperation, but as the coil of a spring preparing to strike. The heavy gloved hands lash out. Miller grabs David's left wrist with crushing force. The sudden, violent, kinetic impact shatters the tense quiet of the cabin. David is yanked violently forward, half pulled out of the deep leather seat. Stop resisting! Put your hands behind your back! The command is a contradictory absurdity. David is not resisting, yet the officer is simultaneously pulling him forward and screaming at him to pull back. It is the classic paradox of police escalation, creating the very resistance it claims to subdue. David's balance is compromised. The narrow aisle provides no leverage. The second officer lunges forward, grabbing David's right shoulder, driving a heavy thumb into the sensitive pressure point beneath the collarbone. A sharp, involuntary intake of breath hisses through David's teeth. The pain is sudden, electric, and blinding. The sheer physical indignity of the assault threatens to breach the dam of his stoicism. The officers pivot abruptly, utilizing their combined mass to violently spin David around in the cramped space between rows 1 and 2. The maneuver is chaotic. Lacking the precision of a controlled restraint, David's torso is wrenched sideways. The sickening sound of impact echoes through the first-class cabin. David's head violently strikes the hard, unyielding composite plastic of the aisle armrest of seat 1C. The collision is blunt and heavy. A brilliant flash of white light explodes behind his retinas. The disorientation is immediate, a wave of vertigo washing over him as the officers continue to drag his arms backward. The metallic click of steel handcuffs is absent. Miller opts for the tactical restraints, anticipating a struggle that does not exist. The thick, black plastic zip ties are whipped around David's wrists. The plastic teeth bite deep. Miller pulls the tail of the zip tie with maximum aggressive force. The heavy plastic cuts instantly into the flesh of David's wrists, instantly restricting the arterial blood flow. The pain shifts from the dull ache of the shoulder to a sharp, burning agony radiating up his forearms. His hands immediately begin to tingle, the nerves screaming in protest against the severe compression. A collective gasp ripples through the premium cabin. The woman in 1A drops her magazine, her hands flying to her mouth in genuine horror. Even Charles Montgomery steps back, the reality of the violence suddenly far more visceral and disturbing than his petty demand for a seat. He wanted the man gone. He did not anticipate a brutal, bloody assault occurring inches from his Italian leather shoes. In seat 3B, the smartphone remains steady. The tech blogger's hands do not shake. The framing is perfect. The digital sensor captures every brutal detail, encoding the trauma into a file that will soon ignite a firestorm. David is forced downward, his knees buckling under the combined weight of the two officers pressing against his spine. The carpet is rough against his cheek. He tastes it. The distinct, unmistakable metallic tang of copper floods his mouth. The impact with the armrest split his lower lip against his teeth. A warm, thick trickle of blood escapes the corner of his mouth, pooling slightly on the edge of his jaw, a stark, violent crimson against his dark skin. The physical damage is minor, but the symbolic violation is absolute. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire is pinned to the floor of a commercial airliner, bleeding, restrained like a violent felon stripped of all autonomy. This is the abyss. This is the moment where anger typically consumes reason, where the victim thrashes against the injustice, providing the oppressors with the exact justification they crave. David does not thrash. He does not scream obscenities. He controls his breathing, drawing oxygen into his lungs through his nose, refusing to let the blood in his mouth choke him. He channels the searing pain in his wrists, the throbbing agony in his skull, converting the trauma into a cold, diamond-hard focus. He is no longer just a passenger. He is the wrath of God, currently gathering data. Get him up! Drag him out! Miller is panting, the adrenaline still surging through his massive frame. He grabs the thick plastic bridge of the zip ties connecting David's wrists, using it as a handle. The mechanical leverage is agonizing. The plastic cuts deeper, breaking the skin. They haul David to his feet. His legs are unsteady, the vertigo from the head strike still lingering. The officers do not wait for him to find his balance. They begin to drag him backward down the aisle, toward the open aircraft door. The walk of shame becomes a procession of violence. David's Loro Piana sweater is bunched and twisted around his neck. His sneakers scuff against the carpet as he is forcibly pulled backward. Over 100 pairs of eyes watch from the economy cabin. The curtain dividing the classes is wide open. A sea of glowing rectangles, smartphones held aloft in trembling hands, illuminates the dim aisle. The red recording lights blink in unison, a digital jury documenting every second of the atrocity. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. The bystander effect is absolute, paralyzing the crowd in a mixture of terror and morbid fascination. They are watching a lynching sanitized by corporate policy and tactical uniforms. As the officers drag him past the forward galley, David's feet find purchase on the metal threshold of the aircraft door. He forces his legs to lock, arresting the backward momentum for a fraction of a second. The sudden stop jerks the officers, throwing them momentarily off balance. David twists his neck, fighting against the suffocating grip on his collar. He ignores the burning agony in his wrists. He ignores the blood dripping from his chin onto the pristine white collar of his undershirt. He seeks out Captain Robert Mitchell, who is standing safely behind the galley counter, watching the violent extraction with a look of grim satisfaction. The captain believes he has won. He believes order has been restored to his metal kingdom. The dark eyes lock onto the silver-haired pilot. The gaze is so intense, so completely devoid of the fear Mitchell expects to see, that the captain involuntarily takes a half-step backward. The split lip parts. The voice is ragged, laced with blood, but the volume is perfect, carrying over the heavy breathing of the officers and the hum of the auxiliary power. It is not a threat. It is a prophecy delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who controls the future. You just destroyed your own career. The officers heave violently on the restraints, breaking David's footing. He is yanked violently backward, stumbling across the gap and onto the ribbed rubber flooring of the jet bridge. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the terminal tunnel blind him momentarily. The heavy aircraft door swings shut with a massive pneumatic hiss, severing the cabin from the outside world, sealing the perpetrators inside the crime scene. The lock engages with a heavy clank. The violence inside the cabin has ended, but the shockwave is already radiating outward. In seat 3B, the tech blogger ends the recording. His thumb hovers over the upload icon. The file is pristine, brutal, and undeniable. He taps the screen. The progress bar begins its steady march across the glass. Data packets surge through the cellular network, carrying the undeniable proof of systemic failure into the digital ether. On the jet bridge, the air is cold and stagnant. David is slammed against the corrugated metal wall of the tunnel. Miller presses a heavy forearm against David's throat, pinning him in place. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not move unless ordered. You are under arrest for assault, trespassing, and interfering with a flight crew. Miller recites the litany of fabricated charges, building the narrative that will justify the blood on the suspect's face and the extreme tightness of the restraints. The second officer is already keying his radio, requesting a transport vehicle to the tarmac level. They intend to remove him through the back stairs, avoiding the public spectacle of the terminal concourse. They want the problem buried in a concrete holding cell before the lawyers can be mobilized. David leans his head back against the cold metal wall. The throbbing in his skull is severe. The blood continues to trickle down his chin. He tests the tension of the zip ties. They are expertly applied, utterly unyielding. Any struggle will only deepen the lacerations. He calculates the timeline. The aircraft door is closed. The pilots are initiating the pre-flight checklist. The massive Rolls-Royce engines hanging beneath the wings are spinning up, preparing to burn thousands of gallons of aviation fuel to push the stolen asset into the sky. Apex Airlines believes they have excised the tumor. They are preparing to fly away from the consequences. The cold metal of the tunnel wall leaches the heat from his bruised shoulders. The physical humiliation is complete. He is a prisoner, bleeding in a forgotten corridor, guarded by men who view him as an animal. It is the exact scenario designed to break a man's spirit, to force him to accept the arbitrary dictates of a racist system. The dark eyes focus on a rivet in the wall opposite him. The stoicism holds. The pain is merely a data point and variable in the complex equation he is currently solving. The trap has snapped shut, but they have locked themselves inside with the predator. David takes a deep, ragged breath. He swallows the blood in his mouth. The time for quiet observation has expired. The time for the avalanche has arrived. The corrugated steel of the jet bridge wall radiates a deep industrial chill, biting through the fine cashmere of the sweater. Down in this liminal space between the terminal and the aircraft, the air smells of oxidized metal and stale floor wax. Sequan Miller presses his forearm harder against the suspect's clavicle, a physical punctuation mark on the arrest. The heavy plastic zip ties bite with agonizing precision into the inflamed flesh of the wrists, sending hot electric pulses of nerve pain up the forearms. The physical machinery of compliance has been fully deployed, yet the psychological submission Miller expects remains entirely absent. The dark eyes looking back at him do not hold the frantic, scanning panic of a trapped animal. They hold the terrifying, infinite patience of an apex predator waiting for the prey to exhaust itself. Blood continues its slow, gravitational trek from the split lip, pooling in the shallow groove of the chin before dropping onto the ruined white collar. The metallic taste is a stark reminder of the violence just endured. I require my legally mandated phone call. I am requesting emergency medical dispatch and my legal counsel before you initiate transport down those stairs. The voice does not waver. It is devoid of the high-pitched adrenaline squeal common to the newly arrested. It carries the resonant, practiced cadence of a boardroom executioner. Miller scoffs, a wet, dismissive sound echoing in the narrow tunnel. He adjusts his tactical belt, shifting his weight to maintain dominance. You don't get to dictate procedure, pal. You get a call when you're processed at the precinct. Now shut up and walk. The second officer, standing slightly behind Miller, shifts uncomfortably. He lacks the blind, aggressive certainty of his partner. He watches the blood drip. He registers the absolute lack of physical resistance and the eerie, crystalline focus of the suspect. The second officer has spent enough time around the wealthy and the powerful in the VIP terminals to recognize the subtle, invisible aura of untouchability. The Loro Piana fabric, the perfect posture despite the brutal restraint, the flawless articulation. A seed of institutional terror takes root in his gut. New York State Criminal Procedure Law, Section 140.20. You have struck me in the head, causing bleeding and potential trauma. Denying immediate medical consultation and legal representation in the presence of physical injury while holding me in an unsecured transit corridor constitutes a deliberate deprivation of civil rights. Hand me a phone. Now. The citation of the Penal Code is not a desperate plea. It is a meticulously aimed scalpel. The second officer's hand instinctively drops away from his baton. The certainty in the suspect's voice shatters the thin veneer of routine police work. They have not arrested a belligerent standby passenger. They have handcuffed a liability. The second officer reaches into his uniform pocket, extracting a generic department-issued smartphone. He steps around Miller, ignoring the sharp glare of his partner. He holds the device up, his thumb hovering over the keypad. What's the number? The digits provided are not a local New York area code. They bypass standard legal switchboards and route directly into the encrypted geopolitical heart of Washington, D.C. The phone rings twice, the connection clicks open. The voice on the other end is sharp, accustomed to fielding crises that move global markets. David leans slightly toward the speaker. He ignores the throbbing in his skull. This is Brooks. I am currently detained in the jet bridge of Apex Flight 412 at JFK. I have been physically assaulted by Port Authority personnel at the explicit direction of the aircraft's captain. I am bleeding. My wrists are bound. A sharp intake of breath whistles through the tiny speaker. The silence that follows is not confusion. It is the sound of a massive, unseen bureaucratic war machine powering on. Ground the plane. Now. Halt all Apex departures from this hub until my team arrives. The connection terminates. David steps back from the phone, allowing his head to rest against the cold steel of the wall once more. He closes his eyes. The avalanche has been triggered. The snow is already falling. Beyond the sealed pneumatic door of the aircraft, the Boeing 777 pulses with mechanical life. Deep within the fuselage, the massive twin Rolls-Royce engines spool up, consuming gallons of volatile fuel, vibrating the floorboards of the first-class cabin. Captain Robert Mitchell sits in the left seat of the flight deck, his hands resting confidently on the thrust levers. The cockpit is a sanctuary of glowing dials, digital displays, and unquestioned authority. He has successfully purged his kingdom of an insubordinate element. The natural order is restored. JFK ground, Apex 412 Heavy, ready for taxi, holding short of Bravo. The radio crackles. Mitchell expects the standard clearance, the numerical runway assignment that will allow him to push back and lift off into the anonymity of the stratosphere. The response is delayed. 10 seconds stretch into 15. The first officer glances up from the navigational computer, a frown creasing his forehead. Apex 412 Heavy, JFK ground, negative clearance. You are ordered to hold position, shut down engines. Mitchell's hand tightens on the throttle. The command is absurd. He is fully fueled, fully boarded, and perfectly aligned with the departure schedule. Ground, Apex 412, we are cleared for pushback. We had a minor security delay, but the hostile passenger has been removed. We are ready to roll. The voice from the control tower drops its standard automated cadence. The human element bleeds through the radio frequency, thick with an undeniable, urgent panic. Negative. 412. This order is bypassing local. It is coming directly from the FAA Administrator's office. Your clearance is revoked. Your departure slot is canceled. Shut down all engines immediately and await the arrival of federal authorities. Do not open the cabin doors. The heavy thrust levers are pulled back. The deep, resonant hum of the Rolls-Royce engines begins to wind down, dying into a pitiful, whining sigh. The sudden silence in the cockpit is deafening. Mitchell stares at the radio console as if it has sprouted fangs. The FAA administrator does not ground individual commercial flights for unruly passengers. The administrator manages national airspace crises, terrorism, and catastrophic systemic failures. A cold, heavy stone of dread drops into the bottom of Mitchell's stomach. The absolute sovereignty of the captain ends the moment the federal government reaches into his cockpit and crushes his engines. Back in the premium cabin, the sudden cessation of engine noise acts as a massive acoustic vacuum. The white noise of the air conditioning is suddenly the only sound. Charles Montgomery pauses mid-sip, his plastic cup of pre-departure gin hovering near his lips. The sudden loss of forward momentum is deeply unsettling. He checks his platinum Rolex. They are burning precious time. Nancy stands in the forward galley, meticulously counting the inventory of warm, mixed nuts. The silence from the engines makes her skin crawl. She steps out from behind the curtain, looking down the aisle toward the sealed flight deck door. No chime, no intercom announcement, just a heavy, expectant void. In seat 3B, the digital realm is moving faster than the speed of sound. The tech blogger's video has finished uploading to the cloud. The algorithm has seized upon the explosive combination of high-definition corporate branding, visceral physical violence, and the stark, undeniable racial dynamics of the encounter. The first 100 views cascade into 1,000 within 60 seconds. The retweets multiply exponentially. The server traffic spikes. Nancy's personal smartphone tucked into her uniform apron vibrates against her hip. She ignores it. It vibrates again, a continuous, frantic buzzing. She pulls the device out, hiding it behind the beverage cart. The lock screen is a waterfall of desperate notifications. Texts from colleagues on other flights, WhatsApp messages from union representatives, Twitter alerts. Are you the airline on 412? Get off the plane right now. Nancy, look at the front page of X. You're trending. She taps the glowing link. The video buffers for a microsecond before playing. The angle is devastatingly clear. It captures her patronizing smirk. It captures Charles Montgomery's venomous demand. And it captures the horrific, brutal takedown of the quiet man in the cashmere sweater. The blood is so vividly red against the blue carpet. The comment section beneath the video is a rolling inferno of public outrage. They just lynched a man in first class. Who is he? Why wasn't he fighting back? Look at the serial number on that jet. That's a Horizon Aviation lease. The smartphone slips from her trembling fingers, clattering onto the galley floor. The screen shatters, a spiderweb of cracked glass obscuring the digital nightmare. The power she wielded 5 minutes ago has evaporated, replaced by the terrifying realization that her face is currently being broadcast to millions of enraged jurors. Down in the concrete stairwell leading from the jet bridge to the tarmac, Miller receives the radio call. The transport van has been halted. Port Authority Command is screaming over the encrypted frequency, demanding a total freeze on all movement. The air in the stairwell is stagnant, smelling of jet exhaust and damp concrete. David stands on the landing, his bleeding wrists held awkwardly before him. He hears the screech of heavy tires on the tarmac below. It is not the rattling diesel engine of a police transport van. It is the synchronized, aggressive braking of 4 black Chevrolet Suburbans. The doors fly open before the vehicles fully stop. The cavalry does not wear badges. They wear bespoke tailoring and carry the ruthless, surgical precision of corporate litigation. A phalanx of lawyers, accompanied by a high-ranking NYPD deputy commissioner and a grim-faced FBI special agent, storms up the metal stairs. Their footfalls echo like a drumline of doom. The lead attorney, a woman whose billable hour exceeds Miller's monthly salary, reaches the landing. Her eyes lock onto the zip ties cutting into her client's flesh, the blood staining his chin. The fury radiating from her is absolute, cold, and devastating. She turns to the NYPD deputy commissioner. She does not shout. She simply points. Remove those restraints immediately and take the badge numbers of these 2 individuals for the federal civil rights indictment. Miller attempts to step forward, attempting to assert his crumbling jurisdictional authority. Ma'am, this is a secure, sterile area. This suspect is under arrest for... This man is David Brooks, Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Aviation, the legal owner of the $12 billion worth of machinery sitting on this tarmac. He is a primary contractor for the Department of Defense. You have not arrested a suspect. You have kidnapped a titan and you have tortured him on camera. The words strike Miller with physical force. The aggressive jawline goes slack. The color drains entirely from his face. leaving a sickly pale sheen of pure terror. The architecture of his bigotry has just collapsed onto his own head. He looks at the quiet man in the ruined sweater. The absence of fear in the suspect's eyes finally makes sense. You do not fear the trap when you own the hunting ground. Heavy steel shears slice through the thick plastic of the zip ties. The snap is loud. The release of pressure is instantaneous, accompanied by a rush of burning agony as blood violently floods back into David's numbed hands. He does not flinch. He rubs his lacerated wrists slowly, feeling the deep indentations left by the plastic teeth. A junior associate steps forward, holding a pristine, tailored suit jacket. It is a charcoal gray Tom Ford, the fabric woven from armor and authority. He drapes it over David's shoulders, instantly covering the blood-stained collar, transforming the battered victim back into the sovereign. Another associate offers a sterile white handkerchief. David takes it, wiping the congealing blood from his lip and chin with meticulous, deliberate strokes. The physical recovery is rapid. The psychological shift is seismic. We have the federal injunction, Mr. Brooks. The flight is grounded. The Apex Board of Directors is convening an emergency session as we speak. We own the narrative. David drops the bloody handkerchief onto the concrete floor. He adjusts the lapels of the charcoal jacket. He looks up the stairs toward the sealed door of the jet bridge leading back into the belly of the beast. The narrative is secondary. I want the immediate, unconditional surrender of the crew. Open the door. The procession moves upward. The FBI agent flashes a master override keycard at the secure reader. The heavy pneumatic lock disengages. The door swings open. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere is a cocktail of suffocating tension and bewildered impatience. Charles Montgomery is furiously tapping his watch, muttering dark threats about suing the airline for lost revenue. The woman in 1A is fanning herself with an emergency exit placard. The heavy thud of the cabin door opening draws every eye forward. They expect a maintenance crew. They expect a gate agent offering paltry meal vouchers. They do not expect the resurrection. David Brooks steps across the threshold. He is no longer the quiet, unassuming target in a casual sweater. He is cloaked in bespoke charcoal armor, his posture radiating a terrifying absolute dominance. The faint smear of blood remaining near his lip only serves to underscore the violence he survived and the vengeance he now brings. Behind him, the FBI agent and the NYPD commissioner flank the entrance, their presence transforming the cabin from a commercial space into a federal crime scene. A collective gasp sucks the remaining oxygen from the room. The tech blogger in 3B drops his phone. Charles Montgomery freezes, the gin sloshing over the rim of his plastic cup, staining his expensive trousers. He shrinks back into his oversized leather seat, instinctively trying to make his body as small as possible. The bully has realized the playground is rigged with landmines. Nancy is backed against the galley counter. Her knees tremble so violently they threaten to give way entirely. She stares at the man she just condemned to the tarmac. The ghost has returned to haunt the executioner. The flight deck door bursts open. Captain Mitchell storms out, his face purple with rage, demanding answers from the universe. He sees the federal agents, he sees the phalanx of suits, and then he sees David. What is the meaning of this? Who authorized you to board my aircraft? The arrogance of the pilot is the last structural pillar of the illusion to fall. David does not raise his voice. He walks slowly down the short aisle, stopping directly in front of the captain and the trembling flight attendant. He reaches into the interior pocket of the charcoal jacket. He withdraws the heavy anodized titanium card. He does not hand it to them. He lets it drop. The metal card clatters onto the hard surface of the galley counter. The sound is sharp, final, and devastating. The embossed lettering catches the harsh overhead light. David Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Horizon Aviation. The silence in the cabin is absolute. The realization detonates in their minds, a slow-motion explosion tearing through 30 years of aviation experience, 25 years of customer service entitlement, and a lifetime of unchecked racial bias. They have not merely insulted a wealthy passenger, they have physically assaulted the overlord of their corporate existence. I am David Brooks. This fuselage, these engines, and the operational lease that allows your bankrupt company to masquerade as an airline belong to my corporation. The words are spoken with surgical precision, dissecting their remaining dignity with a rusted blade. True power does not demand respect. It merely reveals the terrifying consequences of disrespect. Your authority on this vessel is hereby revoked. Your employment with Apex Airlines is terminated. You will be escorted from my property immediately. Mitchell's mouth opens, but the vocal cords are paralyzed. The 4 gold stripes on his shoulders suddenly look like the tinsel of a cheap costume. Nancy lets out a low, whimpering sob, finally collapsing against the aluminum beverage cart. The FBI special agent steps forward. He does not offer polite instructions to relocate. He does not ask for compliance. He unclips the heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. The metallic clinking is the loudest sound in the world. Robert Mitchell, you are under arrest for federal civil rights violations, assault, and filing false operational reports. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The captain, the absolute dictator of the sky, is spun around violently. The steel cuffs ratcheting tightly around his wrists echo the exact violence inflicted upon David 20 minutes prior. A second agent steps over to the jet bridge, dragging a hyperventilating C. Quan Miller into the cabin. The Port Authority officer is already in handcuffs, his tactical belt stripped, his career reduced to ash. The perp walk begins. They are paraded down the narrow aisle. Past Charles Montgomery, who is pressing himself into the window, terrified the contagion of accountability might infect him. Past the tech blogger who has recovered his phone and is live streaming the ultimate devastating karma to an audience of 3 million people. Past the economy passengers who stare in stunned, vindicated silence as the architects of the abuse are dragged away in chains. David stands in the center of the premium cabin. The blood has dried. The restraints are gone. The machinery of justice, fueled by undeniable leverage, has ground the oppressors to dust. The injustice was born in the shadows of quiet indignities, but it dies under the searing, inescapable light of absolute power. The mahogany table of the Apex Airlines executive boardroom stretches for 40 feet, a polished altar to corporate hubris. William Davis, regional director, paces the length of the room, his silk tie loosened, his face a mask of desperate calculation. The viral video has eclipsed 20 million views in under 3 hours. The corporate stock price is currently in an uncontrolled freefall, erasing $1 billion in market capitalization since the opening bell. He needs a scapegoat. He needs to isolate the infection to the flight crew and shield the executive tier from the radioactive fallout of the public relations disaster. We terminate Mitchell and the flight attendant immediately. We issue a standard corporate apology citing isolated deviations from our core values. We bury this by Friday. The heavy oak doors at the end of the boardroom do not simply open. They are pushed wide by federal agents. David Brooks crosses the threshold. He does not wear the blood-stained sweater or the borrowed jacket from the jet bridge. He wears a bespoke midnight blue suit, the armor of a man who has arrived to completely dismantle an empire. He bypasses the empty chairs, walking directly to the head of the table, standing over the terrified Apex CEO, who currently sits frozen in absolute silence. There will be no standard apology, and you, William, will not be issuing any terminations. David slides a thick, leather-bound dossier across the polished mahogany. It stops precisely in front of Davis. The pages within contain the deeply buried customer complaint logs, the encrypted internal emails detailing the unwritten policy of prioritizing elite status over civil rights, the exact statistical proof of a toxic culture nurtured and violently protected by the regional director himself. Horizon Aviation is executing the moral turpitude clause in all of our active leasing agreements. Effective this exact second, Apex Airlines is in default. However, I will offer a singular, non-negotiable path to avoid immediate corporate liquidation. The dark eyes sweep across the terrified faces of the executive board. William Davis is fired. For cause. No severance package. No non-disclosure agreement. He leaves this building with nothing but the clothes on his back. The rest of you will sign the structural reform documents my legal team is currently distributing, or I will ground every single aircraft you lease from my company by midnight tonight. Davis opens his mouth, the instinct to argue warring with the cold reality of absolute defeat. The silence from the rest of the board is deafening. They are throwing him to the wolves to save their own lucrative stock options. The Titan has brought the entire infrastructure to its knees without raising his voice. The federal courthouse in the Southern District of New York smells of old wood, floor wax, and inevitable justice. The courtroom is packed to maximum capacity. A gallery of journalists, civil rights advocates, and 40 past victims of Apex Airlines' discriminatory practices. They sit in unified silence, a living mosaic of the trauma David Brooks is currently prosecuting. On the witness stand, the young tech blogger adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses. The massive television screen erected in the center of the courtroom pauses on a high-definition frame. The image is searing, Officer Miller's heavy knee driven into a pristine cashmere sweater, the dark red blood pooling on the composite plastic armrest of seat 1C. The defendant was completely compliant. He never raised his voice. He never resisted the arrest. They attacked him simply because the captain ordered it, and the captain ordered it because the flight attendant didn't like the color of his skin. The defense attorney for Robert Mitchell attempts to stand, moving to raise an objection about the witness determining psychological intent. But the federal judge silences him with a sharp, echoing strike of the gavel. The visual evidence is an insurmountable fortress. The video does not lie. The video does not carry inherent bias. It simply reflects the ugly, unvarnished truth of the assault. The jury returns their verdicts in less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: federal civil rights violations, aggravated assault, false imprisonment. The heavy clank of the bailiff's steel handcuffs echoes the exact terrifying sound that initiated the nightmare on Flight 412. Only this time the metal binds the wrists of the guilty. The scales of justice are not merely balanced, they are entirely shattered. The consequences ripple outward, destroying the architectures of privilege that insulated the perpetrators for decades. Robert Mitchell stands shivering in the freezing rain outside a desolate, neon-lit strip mall in Queens. He wears a faded nylon windbreaker, the 4 gold stripes of his captain's uniform a distant, painful memory. The Federal Aviation Administration permanently revoked his commercial pilot's license within a week of the verdict. His corporate pension was entirely seized in the massive civil settlement. He leans against a dented high-mileage sedan waiting for a rideshare alert on his cracked smartphone. The screen illuminates. A passenger has accepted the ride, but a microsecond later the notification vanishes. Cancelled. The passenger recognized the profile picture, the face of the racist pilot forever immortalized in digital infamy. He is permanently exiled from the sky, condemned to navigate the flooded gutters, universally despised by the public he once viewed with such arrogant disdain. Miles away, under the harsh fluorescent lights of a highway gas station, Nancy drags a filthy cotton mop across a cracked tile floor. Bankruptcy consumed her suburban home, her life savings completely erased by defense attorneys and civil damages. She wears a generic blue smock, her name crudely written in permanent marker on a peeling piece of masking tape. A customer walks past, tossing a crumpled paper towel onto the freshly mopped floor without offering a single glance in her direction. She grips the splintered wooden handle of the mop, the bitter realization settling deep into the marrow of her bones. The absolute power she wielded in the first-class cabin was an illusion, a temporary uniform she utilized to mask her own profound, suffocating insignificance. Now the uniform is gone and she is entirely invisible to the world. Officer Miller sits on a thin mattress in an 8x10 concrete cell at a maximum security federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania. 3 years. No possibility of early parole. The heavy steel door slides shut with a deafening clang, locking him inside a cage where a tin badge holds absolutely no authority, and where the general population has all seen the viral footage of him brutalizing a compliant, bleeding man. Charles Montgomery sits alone in the echoing foyer of a sprawling, empty mansion in Connecticut. The expensive gin in his crystal tumbler is warm and tasteless. The viral video of his entitled racist demand for the window seat triggered a massive corporate boycott of his global investment firm. Institutional shareholders panicked, liquidating their positions. The board of directors ousted him within 48 hours of the incident. His wife, deeply humiliated by the relentless tabloid coverage and the social ostracization, filed for divorce, taking half of his remaining rapidly depreciating assets. He stares blindly at the blank television screen mounted on the wall, trapped in a silent prison of isolation built entirely by his own unfettered arrogance. The ashes of the old regime fertilize the rapid growth of a new era. The Brooks Protocol is signed into federal law 6 months later. It is a sweeping, uncompromising legislative mandate that fundamentally alters the DNA of commercial travel in the United States. Every gate agent, flight attendant, and pilot undergoes mandatory rigorous bias identification training. Every airport security officer is now equipped with a federally monitored body camera, the footage uploaded directly to independent oversight servers. The Apex Airlines Customer Service Division is completely restructured from the ground up, featuring a direct, real-time reporting application for discriminatory practices. Within a year, the Department of Transportation releases a landmark statistical report. Civil rights complaints across the entire commercial aviation sector have plummeted by an unprecedented 84%. The system has not merely been corrected, it has been violently torn down and rebuilt with human dignity integrated into its foundational code. 2 years pass. The international terminal at JFK buzzes with the familiar chaotic kinetic energy of global transit. David Brooks stands near the plate glass window of Gate 42. His cashmere sweater has been swapped for a tailored yet deliberately understated charcoal blazer. The rolling leather duffel bag remains exactly the same. The environment surrounding him, however, is radically different. The gate agents do not scowl. They stand incredibly straight, offering warm, deeply respectful greetings to every passenger crossing the threshold. The priority boarding lane is orderly, entirely devoid of the aggressive, pushing entitlement that once poisoned the air of the concourse. David steps onto the ribbed rubber of the jet bridge. He reaches the open threshold of the Boeing 777. A new flight attendant, a young woman with a bright, genuine smile, examines his physical boarding pass. "Welcome back, Mr. Brooks. Seat 2A is perfectly prepared for you." He walks into the premium cabin. The slate gray leather is familiar, holding no residual ghosts of the violence that once stained the carpet. He is about to stow his duffel bag in the overhead bin when a subtle, anxious movement catches his peripheral vision. Standing near the heavy curtain dividing first class from the main cabin is a young black teenager. He wears a faded, oversized athletic hoodie, clutching a frayed nylon backpack tightly to his chest. He looks absolutely terrified. He is glancing nervously at his economy boarding pass, then at the wealthy, polished passengers settling into their expansive, luxurious seats. The historical legacy of exclusion still whispers loudly in the boy's mind, making him feel like a trespassing intruder in a space he legally occupies. David stops in the center of the aisle. He recognizes the hypervigilance instantly. He sees the defensive posture of a young man bracing himself for inevitable rejection. He remembers the cold steel of the jet bridge wall, the metallic taste of copper blood, the suffocating, crushing weight of being judged purely by optics. He turns away from the window seat. David walks down the aisle, approaching the teenager. He does not offer pity. He offers elevation. "Are you heading to Los Angeles this morning?" The boy nods quickly, his eyes wide with apprehension. "Yes, sir. I got a full scholarship for an aerospace engineering program at the university. It's my first time on an airplane." David reaches into the interior pocket of his charcoal blazer, extracting the heavy, physical first-class boarding pass. He holds it out. "I prefer the view from the back of the aircraft. It reminds me exactly where I came from, and exactly what we are all still fighting for." Take seat 2A. The engineering program will require you to be completely well-rested when you land. The boy stares at the printed paper, then at the quiet man in the blazer, his mouth falling open in stunned, absolute disbelief. David places the premium pass gently into the boy's hand, offering a firm, reassuring pat on the shoulder. If anyone, and I mean absolutely anyone, questions why you are sitting in that seat today, you look them directly in the eye and tell them David Brooks put you there. David walks past the heavy curtain, moving deep into the crowded, narrow rows of the economy cabin. He finds a middle seat, wedging his broad shoulders between a sleeping college student and a businessman furiously typing on a laptop. The physical space is incredibly cramped. The legroom is virtually non-existent. He leans his head back against the thin, synthetic cushion and smiles. True power is never defined by the expensive leather seat you occupy or the velvet priority lane you are permitted to walk down. True power is the absolute quiet certainty that you possess the ability to dismantle the machinery of injustice, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to rewrite the rules of the sky so that no one ever has to bleed for their dignity again.